Hi again then guys, and welcome to the final road car review out of the most recent batch of cars that we had in the game, and of course this is one which we expected to be brought to the game. It's a pretty obvious one given how strong a lineage the GT-R has in the Gran Turismo franchise. One of the best all-round performance street cars in the game from pretty much any year that you choose, be it way back from its early days right up until the R35, and of course this was the missing piece, in effect, of the lineage, at least from when it became all-wheel drive, you could say, because of course the R31 and previously is a very different animal. Now the R32 we already had, the R34 we already had, even the R35 of course we already have. The R33 was obviously the next logical step to slot right in there to have the complete modern lineage of the Godzilla range. Now this one is my personal favourite Skyline of them all, actually. Now a lot of people don't like the R33 as much, and I do have some theories, some of which I've discussed before, why that could be the case. And some of those reasons are actually the same reason why I really do like it. Now, one of the things that I've always loved about the R33 is that the weight distribution in particular and how that affects the handling is considerably different, I would say, to the R34, 32 or 35. Inasmuch as the R33 has always felt to me much more nose-heavy. Now, it's not actually as nose-heavy in terms of its design as I would say it feels. To me, it feels like it has a much longer bonnet than it does a trunk. That's not necessarily the case. It might be a little bit longer, but it's fairly even still, as all of them have been. Whereas the R32 and the R34 in particular, I would say almost feel like exact 50-50 cars. Now they're not 50-50 like an NSX is, but they're not too far off, especially in the way they handle. They have a very similar 50-50 kind of grip distribution feel that something like an Audi TT Quattro would have as well. Whereas with this one, I've always felt that the R33 is just that little bit more tail happy. And yet at the same time, I think this really does factor into one of the reasons why people don't like it as much. Because if you consider each range of the GT-R, from the R32 right up to the R35, each of them has a very distinct flavour to it, be it the GTSTs, the GT-Rs, the Specners, whatever the case may be. The R32 is the hardcore track car. That's what it is. The R33 is the softer, more beginner-friendly car. It's visually softer, the handling is more forgiving, and it doesn't necessarily feel quite as quick or as aggressive as the others. The R34 is of course the refined all-rounder, probably the most iconic of the entire range, and then the R35 is where it became a true exotic, a supercar, if you will. Many people would say that. Now, the one that stands out the most from those is really the R33, because it doesn't have as much of an edge that the others do. The R34 is simply brilliant, the R35 is ultra exotic, the R32 is hardcore and old school. The R33, it really is the odd one out. It's almost too beginner friendly in some ways, because this car really has no right to handle as easily as a car with 900 horsepower should handle. Now you're probably wondering, looking at the car, why the front end is so high, why the back end is so low, and why you'd have that on a circuit tune. Well, that illustrates my point. The tune setup that I'm using in this video is not a circuit tune. In fact, it's almost the exact same tune with just a couple of diff alterations to what I used in my drag setup video. It's a drag tune with over 900 horsepower, or around 900 horsepower. Imagine if you took a Supra with the drag tune around this circuit, or an RX-7 with the drag tune, or even something like an NSX, which is great to begin with. They wouldn't necessarily handle themselves as forgiving, or in as a forgiving way, and be anywhere near as easy to use as this one is. And I would say that even something like an R32 or 34 even wouldn't quite be as easy to drive. Now that's understandable why, if that is the case, why some people don't like it as much, because they feel like it's not a pro's car, it's more of a beginner's car, whereas the R32's got this hardcore edge to it. It's still forgiving, but it's a bit more raw. I get that thinking, but I like the R33 because of its attitude, And that attitude is really accentuated when you tune and upgrade the car, because this is a very playful Skyline. In fact, I would say it's actually the most playful of them all. It loves to drift, it will readily get its tail out, whereas because of the fact that the 32 and the 34 in particular have, as I said earlier, more of a 50-50 handling feel, they're not as inclined to drift. You can drift them, for sure, and they're very good for it, but this car just initiates the drift instantly. It feels like you don't have to really ask the car to drift, it's ready and willing to do it already. Now, the price is similar to what it already was, about 54 grand. The tuning levels are fairly similar, as I said, around 900 horsepower. Stock, it's 1,540 kilos, so you're looking at just over 200 horsepower per tonne. But of course, the Skylines have always gone way beyond their raw numbers in terms of how good they actually are. So in terms of value for money, any GT-R really is excellent. Until you start getting up into like the spec VR35s, of course, and the Nismo editions, because they get into six-figure prices. But any of the normal ones, which are like less than 100 grand, and especially the pure Skylines, they're superb value. They're super affordable. In the case of this one in particular, extremely beginner friendly, whether you tune it or not. It's just a pleasure to work with, and that is one of the reasons why the R33, despite not being as popular, is still very much so a car that, for instance, on Gran Turismo 6, you could tune way up to just under 650 pp points without a flat floor, over 660 with one, which is literally LMP territory. But the thing is, it's such a forgiving car and such an easy one to use all of its 900 horses in, that it's not just fast in a straight line, which plenty of import cars are, but it has the cornering ability as well. It's got enough grip to make you feel protected and safe in effect, but it's also playful enough to allow that high-speed flow that you would want from a car that you're trying to take on race cars with. And I'm glad to say they've kept that. It still feels playful like that. So it's definitely a car that's still worth checking out. I'm glad they added it to the game. It's my favourite Skyline for those reasons. Plus, I prefer the looks, even though a lot of people I know don't, because it is softer and rounder. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, check out the drag tune if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. So for now, as always, thanks for watching.